On today's episode, we're going to be talking about the top 5 best volume shifted powder boards of the 24-25 season. Number 5 is the Strand of Mackerel. This board is awesome. It's going to have a standard camber profile with a little rocker on the nose. That's going to help it just kind of float a little bit better. So when you are in that fresh powder, all that creamy stuff, you can lean back, use that back foot to drive on it because there isn't any rocker in the tail. It feels nice and stable. But when you do get it on those smooth groomers, if you just catch the day after a pow day and they just perfectly groomed it, you can ride this board just on the bolts and just keep that weight centered and really hold your edge. This board is going to have a nice snap to it, so if you are looking to pop those side hits into pow landings, you don't have a problem there. This thing does have that snap. Now when you do go to lay it on edge, it's going to be nice and responsive for you, so when you're going through those snake runs, you're going to be able to handle it, especially when it gets all chewed out. It's not getting bucked around too much, especially on that lower angle pow where you're keeping this thing. It just feels nice and stable, but has some lively tendencies to it. Number 4, the Roam Service Dog. This board is gonna be camber dominant underneath that back foot and then transition into a flat underneath your front foot with rocker on the nose. So what that's gonna do is you're gonna have that giant nose. So when you're going over the crud, the chunder, all of that, it just wants to just float right over it. Pretty much like one of those airboats you see down in Louisiana where it just can go over any terrain. That's pretty much what this board is. But because the tail is so short on it, all of that ollie power is coming straight from that back leg. You're not gonna have much back there, but that being said, when you do land a little tail heavy on it, because of how that camber profile is underneath your back foot, it does give you a really good set of landing gear there where you don't really wash out on the tail. It's a nice rigid tail. That being said, as I mentioned before, don't expect it to pop you to the moon or anything. That's all coming from your body and not as much from the board. But overall, this thing does turn really well where it is going to be wider underneath your front foot. So if you do have a bigger boot, you can easily get on this and size down to get into those tighter trees where this thing really excels. Once you get in those tight trees to that little low angle pow, even the day after, this thing is so much fun. You can just whip it around and be able to get to all those places that nobody else can. Number 3, the Wired Arc. I know most of you haven't heard of wired snowboards, but they are coming out of Canada and it's an awesome board, especially if you have a big foot and you just want to get something a little bit smaller. Where this board is going to have a hybrid camber profile, so you have camber in between your feet with a large rocker section on the nose and a shorter rocker section on the tail. This board's also going to have urethane sidewalls on it, so it's going to be nice and damp. There is a biax glass top sheet on it, so it does have a little bit of lively tendencies, which I like, and I mean, it's like the perfect mixture of dampness and liveliness, where you still have a great pop to this board, but it doesn't feel like a dead piece of wood there. Where when you're going over those mogul fields or anything like that, if you hit something really hard with it, it just pushes right through. If you're going through a softer mogul field, those contact points on that board just want to curve and hug the snow there, so it just rolls right over them, stays nice in control, just a super comfortable board in pretty much any condition out there. Remember to like, subscribe, click that bell, and turn on those notifications just so you aren't missing any of the scheduled programming we have coming up. Number 2 is the Yes All In. When I first got on this board, I didn't really expect much of it. It is a softer board, super approachable, especially if you're on that lower end of the intermediate scale. This would be a great board for you. Where it does have camber dominance to it, but it does have a lot of rocker on the nose and on the tail. So when you're just learning how to get a little bit more freestyle powder oriented, you can definitely do that on this board. It is really fun when you do take it off of little rock poppers or side hits. You don't really have to load it up too much just because of how soft this board is. You kind of just let the lip do a little bit more of the work for you and you're gonna be just fine. Now, because of how soft the nose and the tail are, you can really butter this thing around, which makes it so much fun. Especially when you get it into that lower angle powder, you can just whip it around, not really have to lean too much, drag a hand, nothing like that. You can get kind of lazy on it and it still wants to ride and track just fine for you. I really enjoyed this board, especially on that lower angle stuff and in those tight trees. But if you want to just take it on a smooth groomer, you definitely can. The thing I would keep in mind about that though, is when you're turning, all of that power is coming in between your feet. You don't have those contact points on the ends of the board to really hold you, so all of that power is coming from right in between there. Honorable mentions. Remember, these are all great options, they just weren't able to crack our top 5 of volume shifted powder boards. The first honorable mention is the K2 Excavator. This board is great. It does have a huge nose on it with some rocker there, so when you are in that fresh powder, it just wants to float. Now this board is stiff enough to be able to take it on just regular groomers and be able to carve it up, especially when the conditions get pushed out towards the end of the day. This board stays stable throughout. Then the next option would be the Salomon Fish. This board has a great shape to it. It is a nice, easy ride that comes in at about the middle of the road for flex, so you don't have to work too hard on it. There isn't much of a tail, but that being said, that little bit of tail still has some decent pop to it. This board is super easy to turn and floats really well, especially in that low angle powder, so it's a great option for you. And the final honorable mention is the Libtech Orca. Now, if you watch my review of the Libtech Orca, you'll know I didn't want to like this board, but it is awesome. Travis Rice does it again, Mervin does it again. This board is great. I wanted to hate it, but it's super easy to turn. It is great in powder. I wouldn't say it's the best for when you're on just groomers or anything like that. Keep this thing in the POW and you're gonna be just happy with it. Remember guys, these are all great options, but they just weren't able to crack our top 5. Are you looking for another way to get involved in the Angry Snowboarder community? If you are, head on over to Angry Snowboarder VIP. Sure, I could explain it here, but we have a great new video over there getting into it really in depth. And the number 1 volume shifted POW board is the Nitro Dinghy. This board is awesome in every way. It has got a little bit tweak to it this year where they did actually add 3D in the nose, so that's actually going to couple with the rocker, give you a little bit extra float and a little bit extra stability in all of that deep powder with it, but it's still going to be camber dominant. So you really get all that camber power, precision, and drive out of this thing, but you can also shift that weight a little bit further back for when you are taking on just smooth groomers with it, where you can actually use that back foot to drive a little bit more and hit a little bit extra of a speed boost. Now, because it is a nitro board, it is going to be more on that lively side, but if you're in fresh powder, it shouldn't really matter with how damp it is, just because you're not going to be feeling all that stuff underneath because you're in that nice deep snow. This board is awesome though, and there are even more reasons as to why it's number 1, and if you want to see those reasons, you should go check out Avran's video. As always guys, I've been your host TC, and this has been our top 5 best volume shifted powder boards for the 2025 season. Leave a comment down below. I do want to know what you guys have to think of this list. If you still need a little bit more information on any of the boards on this list, go check out any of the reviews on our channel.